what the hell's happening here? What is going on? No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. This is fine. Did I mention? Everything's fine. Okay. I'm so cozy. Can you even see it? I'm so comfy. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my, what is my intro? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. My name is Kristen. This is my booktube. And today I am coming to you straight from the Arctic tundra that is Dallas this second week of January. I'm being dramatic. It's about like 30 degrees outside. It's not that cold, but it did snow. So basically the state is shut down. Whenever it snows even a little bit in Texas, people freak out. My office closed yesterday and today, told us to all work from home. So it truly does make it feel a bit apocalyptic, even though there's only like 1.5 inches of snow on the ground and it is melting as we speak. I am wearing my big comfy, it's literally called a comfy, but it's like a Sherpa lined sweater that is way oversized. It's probably on par with baby, like a 5X sweater. Like, you can't even really tell right here, but like I got a lot of room in here, okay? It's got a nice big pocket. I've had this for a few years, and I really love it for instances like this where we get a little cold snap and it is just chilly all day. I just wear this over whatever I'm wearing underneath. And today I am in full hermit mode because I also have pajamas and fuzzy socks on. So we're fully hunkered down. And I figured that now would be a good time to kind of do a little bit of a recap of the books that I read in 2024. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't really feel like filming today. I had full intentions of making this video, but I wanted to like do my hair and look nice and sit in front of my bookshelves like old times, but my bookshelves aren't exactly presentable right now. There's some clutter on them. There's some crafting supplies left over from when I made my Taylor Swift bodysuit and coat. And the day that I was planning on filming this, I ended up getting a migraine halfway through the day. So obviously that filming session did not happen. And I figured sitting here and just being in my nice, fluffy, comfy, and working on a crochet project while I talk to you about books would be the second best way to do this video. So that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna do a little like crochet with me / let's talk about all the books that I read last year. I have my iPad here that has screenshots of my stats from Storygraph. This is going to be the first time that I've really reviewed the books that I read last year. I haven't really done much looking at my 2024 reading stats other than what I mentioned in my video last week. I didn't really look that deep into more of the breakdowns, what I rated everything. So this will be fun to see how much of these books I remember and if I still agree with the ratings that I gave them last year. We have 40 books to go through, and within my reach, I currently have 3 works in progress that I can pick up and work on at any point in time. I have this mesh market bag that I am basically pretty much done with. I just need to do, I think, 3 more rows of single crochets around the straps and then it'll be done. I think this color is so pretty. It's giving me like Little Mermaid vibes. It's called like Beach Ball Blue. Yeah, so this is called Beach Ball Blue by Lily Sugar and Cream. So this is one option and it shouldn't take me too long to finish this one. Option 2 is another mesh market bag because I made a couple of them and then some friends and family started talking about how cute they were and asking if I can make ones for them. So that's what I've been doing. I've been playing around with some colors. I have some friends coming in town this weekend and I just want to have some bags ready for them so that they can pick out fun colors for themselves and have a nice little parting present to go home with. So yeah, in that same vein, I'm also working on this bag as well. This is what it looks like before I connect the 2 edges. Kind of looks like a little net type skirt, but I have about 5 more rows of the mesh part to do before I can do the other, what do you even call this? Band? I don't know. Before I do this other band and then the straps as well. It should turn out looking basically like this one. This is the very first one that I ever made and I kept it for myself just because it was my little like guinea pig bag, you know? So like this is the first one that I made and I'm just gonna make one that's basically the same but with different color straps. And I just really like this color. I think it's really really pretty. And then the last project that I have just sitting right here ready to be worked on is this granny stitch sweater. So this is, I believe it's called like a raglan style. I don't remember, but you basically work it from the neck down, and I just got to the place to connect the armholes like 3 rows ago. So we're slowly but surely making our way on this sweater as well. I do believe that I was filming a crochet with me video where I started this. So yeah, I might be uploading a video of me making this, but not like a tutorial video, because the pattern explicitly said do not like record any tutorials or anything like that. So you may be getting a reading vlog style video of me also making this as well. But we got like, I don't even know how many rows. I need to count, but we've got a lot of rows to go. Obviously, if this is going to go down to like my hips and like actually be a full-length sweater, we got a lot of work to do. So I don't think it'll matter if I put a little bit of me crocheting this in this video. So yeah, those are the projects that we have to work on. And I'm just going to probably start with this bag because this is the one that I have closest to finishing, and we're just going to talk through the books that I read in 2024. And if I finish this one, I will move on to another project until we are done going through the list. So this will also be fun to see what I can finish in the time it takes me to talk about 40 different books. I have no idea how long this video is going to take to film. I have no idea how long this bag's going to take to finish, or any of these other projects are going to take to finish. So this should be a fun time for all of us. But yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started working on this and talking about the books that we read last year. So we're gonna start with the 3-star books. God, I need to remember what I'm doing because I almost did a double crochet without thinking about it. Okay, so we're gonna start off talking about the 3-star books that I read in 2024. This is the lowest star rating that I gave any book this year. I did kind of talk about how it's not that the books that I read in 2024 were bad, because none of them got under a 3-star. I don't think any of them were bad. They were just mid. That's the best way I can think to describe it, because I just remember feeling so underwhelmed with some of these books. So none of these books that I'm going to be talking about were bad or anything like that. It's either the case where I just expected more out of the book based on the synopsis or whatever, or they were written by authors that I just know can do better, you know? And that is the case with several books that I rated 3 stars this year. It looks like the first book that I rated 3 stars this year was The Lying Game by Ruth Ware. I don't really remember a ton of the plot of this book. I quite honestly forgot that I read it because I was looking for a Ruth Ware book to read, and then I thought that I hadn't read The Lying Game until I looked on Goodreads and Storygraph, and I realized that I have in fact read that book. So yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I clearly didn't find the plot of this book that memorable. I have read other Ruth Ware books that I just think are way better in the way that they were constructed, in the way that the twists happened. So yeah, I gave it a mid rating because I felt like it was a pretty mid book. The next one I rated 3 stars was Salem's Lot by Stephen King. And I do remember quite a bit of the plot of this book, mostly because it was a pick for my workbook club, and if I actually like talk about a book out loud with someone, like in a book club meeting where you're sharing your thoughts and opinions on the books that you're reading, then I'm more likely to remember the book because I've actually had conversations about it with people. I didn't talk about The Lying Game with pretty much anyone, so I feel like that's a big part of why I don't remember the plot pretty much at all. But Salem's Lot, I do remember the plot. I just have read better by Stephen King, and when I finished Salem's Lot, I looked back on what I rated Misery and The Shining, because those are the other 2 Stephen King books that I read before, and I just liked both of those more. I really like Misery, and I really enjoyed The Shining too, and I just don't feel like Salem's Lot really held a candle to either of those, in my opinion. So the next 3-star book on my list is Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. Yeah, so my issue with Then She Was Gone, and I feel like this is my issue with most Lisa Jewell books that I've read, is that I guess the twist far too early in the book, and then I just spend most of the book waiting for the main character to figure it out too. And that's just not my favorite kind of thriller, you know? I like ones that have more misdirection, red herrings, that make me question my own conclusions. Even if it's one where I do figure it out early, but there's enough misdirection to make me second guess what I think is happening. I even prefer that over a book like this where it's just so obvious from the jump what is happening. In this book, the main plot point is that Laurel Mack had a daughter that went missing 10 years prior, and they really have no idea what happened to her. I want to say from like chapter 6, I pretty much had it figured out who the culprit was, who took the girl, and what ended up happening to her in vague terms. I didn't know all of the details about what happened to this girl, but like the foreshadowing is just really heavy-handed in Lisa Jewell books, in my opinion. And it just makes it a little less fun, you know? It's just not as fun for me to try and like follow a mystery and figure it out when the foreshadowing is just so heavy-handed, you know? Like, they'll talk about this one character very specifically having green eyes or something like that. And then they will harp on another character who has green eyes. And it's like, okay, well, clearly those two things are related. Like, you wouldn't be going on and on about this person having green eyes unless it was important to the story. And then most of the time, that is exactly what it is. There's no other things like that to make me question whether this is actually relevant to the story or not. You know, it's that kind of thing where, in my opinion, she kind of gives away her own twists in the way that she writes because the foreshadowing is just so heavy-handed. But, I mean, that could be something that some people are into. It's just not one of my favorite things, and that's why I don't really read many Lisa Jewell books, and why I do usually end up rating them around 3 stars, because I just can't give a thriller a high mark when I figure out the main twist in the first 10 chapters. And the last book in our 3-star category is Killer Cult by Addison Moore. So this was a book that I read on my Kindle, and I believe that I got it on like a Stuff Your Kindle day, either heavily discounted or it was free. It is a pretty short book. I think it's only like 200 pages for the ebook, and it definitely needed more than that, especially for the end. Like, it started out so strong. So the premise of this book is that there is this FBI detective whose sister has been missing for, I don't even remember how long, but she's been missing in Colorado. And she believes that her sister has potentially joined this cult. And it was really fun at first, especially the more you got to know about the cult, if you are interested in cults and things like that. You could see the themes from different cults that have gained notoriety in the past like 70 or so years. Like, I definitely picked up allusions to like the Jonestown Massacre and Waco and Heaven's Gate and all of those kind of things, which I did enjoy, but it just felt so unsatisfying at the end, if I'm being completely honest. It's not even that the writing itself wasn't great, but the end just felt so rushed, and I did guess the twist pretty early on, I would say, but the book's only 200 pages, so like, what is early on in a book of 200 pages, you know? And that's not even my biggest issue with this book. My biggest issue is that this book really needed like 50 to 100 more pages at least to properly tie up the loose ends, because I genuinely think that this author took maybe like 20 or 30 pages to wrap the whole book up, and it was messy. I was very unsatisfied with the ending. I think that honestly it was sitting closer to a 4-star for me until I got to the end. And the end was so unsatisfying that I dropped it a whole star, if I remember correctly. I just remember reading the end of this book on my Kindle, putting down my Kindle and being like, is that really it? That's how this book ends? Seriously? They can't all be winners. I guess did not have good luck picking good thrillers this year for the most part. So next up is the 3.25 star category, and I only have one book that I rated 3.25 stars, and that was Murder in the Mews by Agatha Christie. So this book had 3 different short stories in it. It had The Incredible Theft, which deals with the mysterious theft of some very important military top secret plans from, as you would probably guess, a locked room. The second story is called Dead Man's Mirror, and it's another kind of locked room mystery where the main clue that Poirot focuses on, as you can guess from the title, is a mirror that ended up getting broken at the time of the murder. And then the third and final short story is called The Triangle at Rhodes, and it is a Mediterranean beach murder mystery. I rated this 3.25 because though they were fun and light stories, they were so short that I didn't really think that they would stick in my mind that well, and I was kind of correct because I had to go back and read the synopsis for the book to even remember that there were 3 short stories in here and what each of the stories was about. I do think it's a little better than one like The Lion Game, because when I started reading the synopsis of The Lion Game, I really did not remember that book at all until it got to about midway through the synopsis, and I was like, okay, yeah, now I'm starting to remember more of this plot. This one, I did remember each of the stories as soon as I read the little one-line synopsis about them, but I still don't think that it's really anything that I'm going to return to, and it's definitely not going to be one of the Agatha Christie books that I recommend to anyone that asks what Agatha Christie book they should start with. Definitely not going to recommend Murder on the Muse, even though it was a fun time. I feel like that's more for us more dedicated Agatha Christie fans, I would say. The ones that read all of the short stories, you know, the Poirot's Christmas Pudding, all of those specials, that kind of thing. I don't think this is really for someone who is more of a casual Agatha Christie reader, but nonetheless, I still enjoyed it. It still helped me pass a very long road trip, so that's something in itself, I feel. So we have 6 books in the 3.5 star category. And the first one that I read this year was called Catacombs by Mary Anna Evans. And this one was a book that I thought would be a lot more interesting than it was, once again. I mean, it still was pretty good. It's set in Oklahoma City underneath this swanky hotel that is discovered to have a labyrinth of catacombs underneath it. And there is a bomber that is trying to set off a bomb underneath this hotel in these catacombs. And this is actually like midway through an established detective series, or maybe not midway. It is number 12 in a detective series based around the main character, Faye Longchamp. And because this is the only one of these books that I've read, I don't really know if my opinion would be different if I had read some of the precursor books, because I didn't really have much issue with Faye or the established characters. It was more so that the story itself just never really got super exciting for me. This is one of those books where I do remember the plot. I do remember, you know, it being kind of exciting at times, but I just never really got that into it. I remember it being a bit of a chore to finish, and I remember not being satisfied by the ending. So those are the main reasons why I rated it 3.5 stars. I thought it was decent. I thought it was a little more memorable than the other books that I read, but even still, at the end of the year, I forgot that it was even a book that I read. You know, it just kind of exited my mind fairly soon after I finished it. The next book in the 3.5 category was a reread for me, actually, and it was The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkauf. I think that's how you say that. If I'm wrong, I am so sorry, but The Overnight Guest is the book that I read. And this was a pick for my workbook club, and I ended up giving it the same rating that I gave it before. And it's for the same reasons, because my experience didn't really change much the second time. I do think it was a fun reread, but I don't remember anything particularly jumping out at me, because if you're a thriller reader and you like to go back and reread some thrillers, especially ones that have really good plot twists, a lot of times when you do a reread, knowing how it ends, the reread is a bit of a different experience, and it makes it a little more fun, in my opinion, because you can pick up on things a little bit earlier when you know what the solution is at the end of the book. And I thought maybe that would happen with this book, but I don't really remember there being many instances of that happening. And I think that is partly because I put together a lot of the twists in this one early on the first time that I read it. Like, don't get me wrong, the twists were good, but I did figure it out, I want to say, like midway, if not earlier, the first time that I read it. And once again, I think it comes down to heavy-handed foreshadowing. So yeah, I think that it was a fun thriller. It's a fun concept, you know, being snowed in the middle of nowhere in Iowa, and then all of a sudden you find this small child buried in the snow with no adult around. It is a very intriguing concept for a thriller, and I do think that it was a fun read. I just can't really give it 4 stars when I guessed the twist very early on in the book. The next book that I rated 3.5 stars was Perfect by L.A. Kessler. So this was another thriller that kind of dips a toe into the sci-fi realm a bit, because this has to do with 2 scientists that are living in a house and trying to produce a perfect child. And one day their main experiment, their perfect child that has now lived about 17, 18 years and has not contracted a disease, not gotten a cut, a scrape, anything like that. She is quite literally perfect by their scientific definition. She begins to realize that her family is different, that her parents are lying to her about why she is stuck inside all the time, and she decides to run away and escape from her parents. And with the help of a neighborhood boy, she gets herself and her younger sister out of the house, and they go on the run. And I will say, this book was really good for a good chunk of it. I really enjoyed quite a bit of it. Once again, my issue is I don't like the way this book ended. I think that it was haphazardly tied up. It's part of a trilogy that I don't think I'll be continuing. That was my biggest gripe with it. I thought it was really good up until the end, and the end kind of put a damper on the whole book for me. So I dropped it from potentially a 4-star book down to a 3.5. Not bad by any means, but definitely not one that I think I will reread going forward. So next up we have The Better Sister by Alifair Burke. And this was another pick for my work book club. This is a thriller, as you can imagine, about 2 sisters. And it's kind of weird because one of them is married to the other's ex-husband, and then the husband is murdered. And it is quite quickly pinned on his son, who is the biological son of the sister that was married to him first, and the stepson to the sister that was married to him second. And then the son sees the second sister as more of a mom than his biological mom, even though she's his aunt. And it's confusing, okay? That family dynamic is so weird. It does not compute in my brain. So this is another book that I, once again, figured out the twist pretty early. I do think that the writing was really good. I did really enjoy it, even though the family dynamics were really weird. So yeah, this is just another instance of, it was a pretty decent thriller. I just figured out the twist really early on, so I couldn't rate it any higher than like a 3.5. Then we have The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley. And this is another thriller that I gave 3.5 stars because it was pretty decent, but I've read better by Lucy Foley. I think The Hunting Party and The Wedding Party are both way more intriguing than this one was. And I do think, once again, I figured out the twist pretty early on with all of the heavy-handed foreshadowing that is in this book. And then rounding out the 3.5 star category, we have Evil Under the Sun by Agatha Christie. And this one, I will say, did remind me of the Triangle of Rhodes short story that was in the Murder in the Mews book. Not a ton, but I do feel like this book may have been inspired by the short story, or maybe vice versa, because there were just parts of the plot that just reminded me of that short story as well. And once again, it's not that I didn't like this book. It was fairly decent, but I just know that I've read other better Agatha Christie books. I mean, the woman has like 80 books in circulation. They can't all be 4 stars and above, okay? Some of them gotta be like mid, like 3.5, 3-star books. So we're just trying to keep it fair, okay? I will say that I do try to rate books relative to each other, especially books that are by the same author. So oftentimes when I'm reading an Agatha Christie book, I will go back and look at what I've rated other Agatha Christie books that I think are about on par with the one that I just finished. And I will do my rankings that way, just so I know that all of the Agatha Christie books, if I go back and I look at my ratings for them, I know that they are all rated relative to each other, so they should fall in line from my least favorite to my most loved when I lay them out in rating order, if that makes sense. But yeah, so I gave this one a 3.5. It was fun for what it was, but I don't think that it's one that I will be returning to anytime soon. Alrighty, and now for the 3.75 books. I have 6 in this category as well. And the first book that I have in this category is What Lies in the Woods. So this was one of the first physical books that I read this year. And I did enjoy the book. I thought it was interesting and I thought it was really well written. And I think that I gave it a 3.75 because if I remember right, I partially guessed the twist right. It was a little more convoluted than I anticipated, so it had more layers than I thought it did, but I did get at least one of the layers right. So I gave it a 3.75. So according to Storygraph, I started this book in May of 2023 and I didn't finish it till mid-February of 2024. It took me 9 months to read this book. And I think that was a lot due to how I felt about the main character. I really did not vibe with her that much. So I think that that is partly what made this a bit of a drag for me to get through and why it took me so long to finish it. But in the end, I did like the story overall. There were other characters that I did like in the book and some that I really did not. The next book in this category was another workbook club pick, and that was Mother's Instinct by Barbara Abel. So this was a really good psychological thriller, and I know that it came out last year on Hulu, I believe, with Jessica Chastain and Anne Hathaway. I believe those are the two women playing the main characters. And I did enjoy this book quite a bit. It's set in France. I don't know if the Hulu adaptation is the same because I did see that they changed the characters' names to be less French. So that leads me to believe that it is not set in France like the book is, so that would be interesting. I feel like since I've read the book, I should watch the movie and see all of the differences because I believe when I watched the preview, I spotted several just in the preview alone. So it would be interesting to see how much has actually changed from the book to the screen adaptation. This was a really good suspenseful thriller. It deals a lot with trauma and loss and grief. There is the death of a child in this book and, the kind of grief that a mother goes through when they lose a young child like that. I believe he's about 8, maybe. He may be younger, he may be older, but he's around that age. And it kind of follows these two couples that are friends as one of the couples is going through this tragedy. And then it takes a bit of a sick and twisted turn at a certain point. I'm sounding like a broken record, but once again, I figured out this twist very early on. And I don't know if that's really the author's fault so much as it is maybe my own, because I will say that based on the conversations that I've had with my coworkers about this book, it does seem that I was in the minority of figuring out this twist early on. So that's why I'm being intentionally vague, because I would recommend this book to other people. I think that it was a very good thriller. Just know that there is a bit of a trigger warning for grief and child loss that I would put on this book, but it is a pretty good thriller overall from what I remember. Keep in mind, I did read this book in March, but it has stuck around in my mind. I do remember exactly the point where I figured out the twist in the book, and that is why I remember when we talked about it in my book club that I was one of the only people that figured out the twist from this specific plot point. So I'm being intentionally vague because I do recommend this book for other people to read, and it's recently been turned into a movie. I don't want to spoil the movie if it is the same as the book. Questionable. Maybe I'll watch the movie and it'll be totally different and I won't guess the twist early on like I did in the book. I guess I'll have to watch it to see. So the next book on the list is Just Another Missing Person by Gillian McAllister. And this is the same author that wrote Wrong Place, Wrong Time, which I believe I read in 2023. I'm pretty sure. That was one that was really interesting to me. I thought it had such a unique concept to it because it was like a time traveling thriller where the main character witnesses her son committing a murder and then travels back in time until she figures out what events led to her son committing this murder. I really enjoyed that one a lot, and once again, I did rate this book relative to what I rated that book, And this book just wasn't nearly as intriguing and gripping as that one was for me. It was still good, but I do think that it could have been better, and I do believe that I figured out the twist once again earlier on than I would have liked. So all of those things considered, I gave it a 3.75. Next up, we have another Ruth Ware book, and this one is 0 Days. And this book centers around a hacking couple that stress tests security systems in London. I thought that was such a fun background to give a main character. And it's a husband and wife team. The husband does the more tech side of like jailbreaking into the systems in an office, and then the wife does the more physical break-in side. And they are actually like legitimately paid people to stress test these systems. Companies will contract them to try and break in and get confidential information. And then they send the company a report the next day to let them know where their weak spots are and what they were able to access and how they can fix it. So that alone I thought was just such an interesting concept for like the background of a main character. But then one night after a job, our main character comes home. She was accidentally detained by the police because apparently that happens sometimes in this line of work. I've never heard of this profession before this book, but in Ruth Ware's story, that happens to this character sometimes. You know, people see her trying to break in and they don't believe her that the company paid her to do it. Makes sense. So yeah, she gets detained during this job, and then she comes home afterwards to find that her husband had been murdered in their home at his computer. She then basically becomes suspect number one, and she goes on the run, determined to prove her innocence and figure out who actually killed her husband. I thought that this was such a fun book. I really enjoyed it a lot more than The Lying Game. You can probably tell just by the way that I talk about it that I liked this book way more. I didn't have to look up a synopsis or anything. I just remembered off the top of my dome what this book was about because I did thoroughly enjoy reading it. So it was way better than The Lying Game, but I don't think it was as good as some of the other Ruth Ware books that I've read. I don't think it was as good as In a Dark, Dark Wood or Turn of the Key, but I thought it was a little bit better than One by One. So it kind of landed in the middle, and it's in good company. You know, It Girl is there too. So as you can probably tell, I've read a lot of Ruth Ware books. So it was pretty easy for me to find a spot where 0 Days would fit in with the rest of the Ruth Ware books that I have already finished. And 3.75 felt just right for that one. Then we have Happy Place by Emily Henry. I do believe that one was also a workbook club pick. I enjoyed Happy Place. I do think that there were some plot points that I didn't quite enjoy as much. And that in combination with the fact that I liked Beach Read more, and I rated that one 4 stars. So though I did enjoy Happy Place, it's not my favorite Emily Henry book, and I enjoyed both Beach Read and Book Lovers more than Happy Place. So that made me put Happy Place at 3.75 so that it would properly reflect the hierarchy of the Emily Henry books that I've read. And yeah, I don't think that I've really thought much about Happy Place since I read it, if I'm being quite honest. And then the last book in the 3.75 star range was One to Buckle My Shoe by Agatha Christie. And the plot for this one is that a dentist is murdered in between clients, and as you would probably suspect, one of his clients is Poirot. So he is obviously dragged in as soon as it is found out that this dentist was murdered. And I thought this one was really fun. This one actually made me giggle a couple times because there is a plot point where Poirot is afraid of going to the dentist, and right off the bat it had me chuckling because it's that same thing that still happens to this day. I don't know if like dentists are taught this in dental school, but they always try to talk to you when they're like all up in your mouth trying to do stuff. And I don't know if it's like supposed to be comforting, like, you know, put you at ease, but I always just think it's so funny because you can't respond because their hands are in your mouth, their tools are in your mouth. So you can't like say anything. You can't nod or shake your head. You can really only grunt. So like, why are they asking you questions? And it's just so funny because like this book was first published in 1940s. So like apparently that's been a thing for a long time. And on top of that, Poirot's afraid of the dentist. So this dentist is trying to make conversation with him while he's like tapping around on his teeth and stuff. And you get a little bit of the inner monologue of Poirot, and he's basically saying to himself, like, I can't let this dentist know that I'm afraid of being at the dentist. So he's trying to act natural, but like at the same time, he can't answer questions because the dentist's hands are in his mouth. It's just a funny scene, like right off the bat in the beginning of the book. And then like right after that, the dentist is murdered and everything kicks off. So I just thought that was so fun. And I thoroughly enjoyed those plot points. But at the same time, I did not think that the resolution was as good as some of the other ones. So I did end up rating this a 3.75, and that's probably purely because I just know that there are better Agatha Christie books out there. Like I said, not all of them can be 4 stars, so I'm trying my best to be fair with my judgments and actually give them an honest rating and not just fawn over her, because there are Agatha Christie books that are like some of my favorite books of all time. So yeah, that rounds out the 3.75 category, and from here on out, hopefully I'll have more positive things to say, because from here on out, all of these books have been rated 4 stars or higher. So that should mean that I like them, right? I forgot to put my stitch marker back on. This is what happens when I just start yapping and I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing, but we're back on track. I got my stitch marker here so I don't just keep going into oblivion. Although I'm pretty sure this will run out before I even get to the end of this, but we'll see. Oh, is this my last row? Oh, it is. Okay. Damn, we are zipping through this. Okay. Well, I say zipping. I'm at an hour and 10 of recording, but you know, for me being distracted while crocheting, this is going pretty well, I think. Alrighty, and the first book that we have in the 4-star category is You're Invited by Amanda Hayatissa. I don't know how you say her last name, but Amanda. And this book is set around a luxury wedding that takes place at this big swanky hotel in Sri Lanka. And that is just such an interesting setting for a story. And on top of that, the plot gets really interesting too, because our main character has been invited to this wedding by her ex-best friend, who she has not spoken to in years, who is engaged to her ex-boyfriend, who she was in a serious committed relationship, I believe pretty much all through her undergraduate degree that she did in the United States. And she returns home to Sri Lanka to attend this wedding because, you know, her ex-best friend invited her and she was thinking that maybe, you know, this is the time to bury the hatchet kind of thing. And when she shows up, she finds out fairly soon after she shows up, the bride is not actually the one that invited her to this wedding. And then a murder happens. So this is one of those books that bounces back and forth between past and present perspectives. Some of it is told by police interrogation reports, you know, interviews that the police do after the murder is committed. I think between the unique setting and the way that everything played out, I did really enjoy this book, but I do think that there was a lot of room for improvement, and there were just some things that didn't really gel well, some loose ends that maybe weren't tied up as well as I would like, but all in all, it was a pretty solid thriller, and I did really enjoy it. And this was another physical book that I read at the beginning of last year, so it has been a full year since I started this book, so it's a good sign that I can remember this much of it, I feel, even a year later. The next book that I rated 4 stars in 2024 is also the only nonfiction book that I read in 2024. And that is Sorry I'm Late, I Didn't Want to Come by Jessica Pan. And this was once again another workbook club pick. I don't think I would have picked up this book on my own. As you all are probably well aware, I am not a nonfiction book girly. I have read a couple really popular nonfiction books in the self-help category, like Atomic Habits, and then this one I know has been fairly popular. But I don't really go seeking those books out on my own. Usually I am either doing a buddy read with someone or it is for a book club meeting. I don't really gravitate towards books like this on my own. And though I don't think I would take much from this book in the way of inspiration, I do think that it was entertaining. And for me personally, it was quite a fun read because she has a very specific perspective that, funny enough, I also share, because the author is an American living in London
who is from Texas originally, and she's an introvert trying to make friends in the UK. And that is such a specific experience, but I have had that exact experience, like down to the T, that exact experience of being an adult woman who's from Texas, living in London, trying to make friends and meet people. And yeah, it's really hard to do, honestly. It took me a very long time to make friends in the UK. Mostly because this is what I like to do. I like to sit on my couch and be cozy and not really go out places, but, you know, outside is where all the people are. So if you want to make friends, you kind of got to go outside at least a little bit. If you want, like, IRL friends, you know, you can always make friends on the internet, but, you know, if you want, like, IRL friends to hang out with and that are in the same time zone as you, a lot of times you gotta go out and you gotta socialize with people, which is not something that I really want to do, you know? I'm pretty introverted. I know it might be surprising, being that I'm sitting here and doing this, but, you know, it's a lot easier to just sit here and yap to myself and just feel like I'm talking into the void. And I just don't think about, you know, how many people are watching this and whether they know me or not. You know, I'm just yapping. But because I have such an intimate experience with what she's trying to do in this book, I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4-star just because it was a bit of a drag to get through. I think this is the only book for a workbook club that I did not finish before the meeting. I was about halfway through when the meeting actually happened, and then I finished it, I thought it said February 14th. I finished it on February 24th, so I finished it at the end of February. So I was like a month late with finishing this book, and I did still go to the book club meeting because since this was a nonfiction book, I didn't really feel like it was gonna spoil anything if I went to the book club meeting, having not finished this one. If it was a fiction book and, you know, there was an ending to spoil, I probably wouldn't have gone, but, you know, she's just talking about trying to overcome being an introvert and trying to make some friends, so it didn't feel like there was much of a plot there to spoil. And I do think, if I remember right, I rated it higher than most people in my book club did, and I think that is specifically because I know what she was going through. I know exactly how she felt. Honestly, it was probably worse for me because she at least had a significant other. I did not. I was completely alone in the UK. I didn't have nary, like, a pet to come home to. You know, I was truly out in those streets alone at that point. So I knew what she was going through. I knew the struggle she was having. I understood it very well. Like, even when she was talking about how, you know, like, in London specifically, where you live does have a lot to do with who you're friends with. Like, I also lived south of the river. There's not a lot of trains that go south of the river. So if I wanted to socialize with people, I had to trek up to central London or wherever my friends were if I wanted that socialization. No one was coming to me because it was such a hassle to get to where I was. And I think, if I remember right, in that book, she talks about meeting someone and them saying they live south of the river, and she was like, we're never gonna see each other again. And yeah, that does happen. That's not hyperbole. That happened to me several times. Though I really enjoyed this book, I think that it has a lot to do with the very specific experiences that I had that align with what this author is experiencing. So I don't think that this is a book really for everyone, and considering the fact that I did not take any, like, tangible advice from this book really, I don't know if other people would really enjoy this book as much as I did. For me, it was more so commiserating in the situation she was in. And it was nice to read about that experience from someone else who has also experienced it because, you know, when I was going through it, it kind of felt like there was just something wrong with me specifically. But, you know, now I realize it's just how things are in London, you know? And it was just nice to know that I'm not the only person that has struggled with that specifically. And it was nice to see my own issues with making friends in a foreign country like that reflected in someone else's work. Okay, so these next 3 I'm going to talk about together because they're part of the same series, and that is the Throne of Glass series. So I made it through the first 3 books in the Throne of Glass series in 2024. I initially wanted to get through the whole series, but, you know, that took a backseat a lot of the time, especially when I got to Assassin's Blade. That took me a while. I rated them all 4 stars. I really enjoyed the first book, Throne of Glass. I thought it was so fun. It was very reminiscent to me of the Hunger Games, and if you've been around for a while, you know about my love for the Hunger Games series. It is probably one of the first book series, aside from Harry Potter, that I got like really into, because in my mind, Harry Potter is more nostalgic nowadays than it is like just a good book series, you know, because I read them when I was so young and I have reread them as an adult. And you know, it's just different. It's different going back to books that you read as a kid and having that nostalgic connection than it is going back to a series I read as a teenager and just reliving a good story, you know? But anyways, we're not here to talk about the Hunger Games. We're here to talk about Throne of Glass. Throne of Glass did give me Hunger Games vibes in the way that the competition went for the champions. You know, they had the whole like training arena, and it kind of just felt like the beginning part of the Hunger Games, you know, when Katniss goes to the Capitol and she's like demonstrating what she can do to the game makers and stuff. And I don't even remember if they show it much in the movies, but they have all of these like training areas so that, you know, everyone has an equal opportunity to learn about poisonous plants or how to fight and stuff like that. And I feel like it's that kind of vibe that Throne of Glass gives me if you added in more competitions. And yeah, so I really enjoyed the first book, Throne of Glass, and then I also read Crown of Midnight, and I also thought that was pretty good as well. But from what I've heard from my friends, the series gets so much better once you get into Heir of Fire, which is the book that I'm going to start next in the series. So I wanted to make sure that I gave myself room to go either way, and I figured that, you know, the books early on in a beloved 8-book series like this were going to not be the best ones in the series. At least I would hope not. I feel like with series, they really need to peak earlier on than the first book in order to retain the traction and the audience, if that makes sense. At least that's how it works in my brain. But for the first 3 books, I thought they were all pretty solid, and they're more so world building feeling than I think the rest of the series will be, because Throne of Glass was establishing characters and the kingdom as a whole. Crown of Midnight felt like it was really setting up for the rest of the series, and Assassin's Blade are all of like the prequel short stories that just give you more background for our main character Selena throughout the rest of the series. So it feels like these 3 books are really just doing all the world building and setting you up for what is to come in Heir of Fire and beyond. It felt right to put them all at 4 stars because they were all good, and I'm sure that they're all serving their purpose in the long run, because I know a lot of stuff about these characters, and I'm excited to see where it's gonna go now that I know all of this stuff about these characters and the history behind Selena and what led her to Andover and, you know, what was going on in the castle while she was doing her thing in Assassin's Blade. It's just kind of all starting to come together in my mind, and I feel like once I start Heir of Fire, we're gonna really lock things into place and the story's gonna take off. That's my theory. At least for my 2025 reading for the rest of the Throne of Glass series. I'm hoping I can finish the Throne of Glass series this year. If I don't come for me, please. So next up, we have another reread for me, and that is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. And this was a book club pick as well, but I don't think many people in my book club really liked it. I think a lot of people DNF'd it, honestly. And like, I just don't understand that, because I really like this book. I don't know if I'm the weird one because I like this book so much, but it's just so interesting. Like, I get that it's a lot to keep up with, and it is a very convoluted plot. I'm not saying that it's not complicated and it's not convoluted. It is. It definitely is. It's one of the more complicated thrillers / mysteries that I've read, but if you push your way through to the end, if you make it to the end, literally everything is explained. So any confusion you have or questions or things that seemingly don't make sense are tied together in the end. Maybe it's just because I'm too stubborn to DNF a book for the most part. Like, a book has to be really, really bad for me to not finish it. But I usually always push through to the end of a book, even if I'm not really liking it, because I want to give it a chance. You know, I'm always thinking that maybe if I get to the end of the book, maybe it'll all be resolved. Maybe I'm just judging it too early. and I just need to see where it's going. And maybe that's just not how other people read. I'm not entirely sure, because I've read this book twice now. I did it physically the first time, and then I did the audiobook the second time. And I remember when I was reading it physically in like 2021, maybe. I read it a while ago. Maybe 2022. I can't remember. But in any case, I read it a while ago. But I remember when I was physically reading it, closing the book and just sitting there and thinking about it for a while whenever I would read, because I was so invested in the convoluted story and trying to figure out what's going on that I would literally just sit there and think about it and try to digest what was happening in chunks so that I could potentially figure out what was going on in the end. I never figured it out on my first read. And then by the time we got to reading it for my book club, I had forgotten the ending and what was actually going on. So it was kind of like a new read for me the second time. And I ended up explaining the ending to pretty much everyone that did show up to that book club meeting, because I think only 2 of us finished it and the other girl that finished it was sick that day. So I basically just explained what was going on to the people that did not finish it. And yeah, I personally really like this book. It's not a perfect book by any means. There are still some loose ends that are not tied up at the end. There are some plot points that I don't like. Some of the writing choices I'm not a big fan of. It's definitely not a perfect book, but I think that the concept of a Groundhog Day murder mystery where our main character just keeps reliving the same day over and over again until they figure out what's going on is so interesting. It's so unique, and I just love that plot so much, and I think that overall it's done really well, but you do have to make it all the way to the end. If I remember right, I think that you don't really know for sure what's going on until literally like the last couple chapters of the book. So all that to say, if you do give The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle a chance, just be patient with it, you know? Take in the information, pause it to think about it if you need to, but just keep going with it, because at least in my opinion, the payoff in the end is so good. Next up, we have The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, and this one was another ebook that I read on my Kindle. This one did take me a while to get through, but it was mostly just because I was reading it on my Kindle and I low-key kind of forgot about it for a while. But I did end up finishing it in June, and I gave it 4 stars. I did enjoy it a lot, but I did not think it was as good as Home Before Dark or Lock Every Door. So I just had to rate it a little bit lower than either of those. I still enjoyed it. I still thought it was like creepy and interesting and intriguing, but I mean, clearly if I put it down and then I forgot about it entirely for a couple months, it clearly didn't capture my attention as well as the other Riley Sager books have, because when I read both Lock Every Door and Home Before Dark, I remember having those books on my mind for a while after finishing them and while I was reading them, so I just know that Riley Sager can do better. So even though this was a really good book, I rated it 4 stars because I just know he's got like 4.5s and stuff in him. I know that he can do better than that. Alrighty, and the next book in the 4-star category is Cards on the Table by Agatha Christie. And this was a really fun story. So this centers around a flamboyant collector who, I believe they're at like a museum gallery or something like that. And he walks up to Poirot and starts talking about how he is so fascinated by crime and specifically by criminals. And he is a collector of both curiosities from his travels abroad and also a collector of people, as he tells Poirot. What does he mean by that? He doesn't mean that he like physically keeps people in his house like as prisoners. That's not what he does. He befriends criminals and he invites them over for like dinner and drinks and game nights and stuff. And he invites Poirot to come over to his house because he's going to have a bridge night with some of his favorite criminals. And Poirot shows up and sees that, you know, they have these bridge tables set up. They have one table for more beginners and like casual players, and one is for the players who are really good at bridge. You know, everyone's drinking, having a good time, playing bridge, all of that stuff. The host is playing for a little bit, hanging out, and then he decides to go sit in front of the fire in one of his like big wingback leather chairs, because it's the 30s and, you know, that's what rich people do. And, you know, he sits in front of the fire, and at some point someone goes to like talk to him about something, and they realize that he is dead. And, you know, since Poirot's there, he's on the case immediately. Poirot is now in a house full of criminals where the host has been mysteriously murdered, and he has to figure out who exactly did it. And I remember this one being really fun. I really enjoyed the investigation going on in this book. You know, he does his Poirot investigating where he's asking, you know, seemingly innocuous questions that don't really have a lot to do with what's going on. But in the end, they do actually end up mattering quite a bit. Apparently, you can tell a lot by the person by the way that they play bridge, or so says Poirot. But yeah, this book was really fun. I did thoroughly enjoy this book. I feel like I learned a little bit about bridge. I have no idea how to play bridge, but you know, just from the descriptions in the book, I feel like I learned at least a little bit about playing bridge. Alrighty, and the next book that I rated 4 stars was The Hobbit. I tried to read The Hobbit for the first time a couple years ago. I tried to read it physically, and it was just too much for me to read physically. This is the only Tolkien book that I've read, but it did seem like he's a little wordy with some of his descriptions, and some of his scenes go on for a while. So just for the sake of like me paying attention and making sure that I'm getting all the information that's needed, I decided to listen to the audiobook this time around, and that was a good choice. I thoroughly enjoyed the audiobook, especially the narrator of the audiobook that I listened to did a great job. Made it very fun and entertaining. He did fun little voices and stuff for the different characters. And yeah, I did enjoy it quite a bit. It was really fun to have this like epic journey, and then Bilbo just being like, I would rather be at home with all of my food and my comforts. Like, I didn't even get my second breakfast today, and I would rather be home right now. So, you know, it was just a fun time. And I do plan on reading the Lord of the Rings trilogy at some point this year. But of course, I had to start with The Hobbit, and I did really enjoy it. I see why it's a classic. I see why people love it so much, and why it is the foundation for one of the biggest series probably ever, honestly. Don't take my word for that. That's just an observation, I feel. But yeah. Then I read Keep It in the Family by John Mars. And this was an interesting thriller about a house where these people find a bunch of suitcases in the attic that have bodies in them. So that's fun. And then they have to figure out why the heck are all of these bodies in this house. So this one I ended up rating 4 stars, just because I have read another John Mars book before. It was What Lies Between Us, and that one I think was just a little bit better than this one was. So I ended up rating that one a 4.25, and just to keep it relative within the same author's books, I gave this one a 4 star. And I can't remember if I figured out the plot twist early. Based on the rating, I don't think that I did. I may have had suspicions, but I did not fully guess what was going on in this book, I don't believe. Then I also read The Good Samaritan by John Mars as well, and I rated this one 4 stars too, basically for the same reasons. The Good Samaritan focuses on a woman that works at the Suicide Hotline Center in the UK, and she basically assists people in committing suicide. Instead of talking people off of that ledge, she basically talks them into it. In her own mind, she thinks that she is helping them, and that she is doing good. And yeah, I thought that this book was fairly decent. And I did enjoy this book quite a bit. I did listen to it on a road trip, so it went by pretty quickly, but I do remember enjoying it, and the plot was very interesting. It did kind of remind me of Ted Bundy a little bit, just because, you know, fun fact, he worked at a suicide hotline center. I don't remember if he volunteered or what, but he was there. And I know that's not like his MO, but it just made me think of him. Then on that same road trip, I also read A Dowry of Blood. And this one is a Dracula retelling, but it's from the perspective of the bride of Dracula, who is very, very briefly mentioned in the original Dracula novel. But in this book, she gets her own narrative, and I gave it a 4-star just because I did thoroughly enjoy the book for the most part. What I didn't like was that instead of the book meeting up with the narrative that's in Dracula, you know, there's like this big climactic scene in Dracula where Dracula dies. That's like a well-known thing. It's a plot point. And I just don't like taking that core plot point of Dracula out of the story entirely for the sake of this retelling. In my opinion, I think that retellings should be fairly close plot-wise to the original source material and just fill in blank spots, but I did not like that this one rewrites how Dracula dies. So even though the writing in it is beautiful and I really enjoyed the book, that ending just did nothing for me, so it knocked it from probably like a 4.5 or something like that down to a 4-star. The next book that I rated 4 stars was Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. And I have read Ninth House before. This is the second book in the Alex Stern series, which is just the name of the main character. It is the book that comes after Ninth House, and I read Ninth House a while ago. I liked this book. I thought it was pretty decent. There will be a reading vlog at some point where you find out exactly how I feel about this book, because I do remember recording that. I just have not edited the video yet, so look forward to that coming soon. But my main issue with Hellbent is that it felt like it was just doing too much, you know? Like, in Ninth House, we really ended that book knowing that, okay, we are gonna literally go to hell to try to bring Daniel Arlington back from the other side. We don't really know what happened to him. We just know that he is stuck in hell, literally. And we did get resolutions for that. What I wasn't prepared for and what really like threw me off was the addition of vampires in this book. So there's a whole like secondary plot with this vampire in town, and he's kind of hunting Alex, kind of not. His familiar's like following her for a bit. She like goes to his house and then he like almost catches her. And, like, I feel like it just added too much, you know? We already have a lot going on with Darlington being stuck in hell and trying to figure out how to get him out of there. And I know that the addition of the vampires is probably setting up the next book in the series, but it just was too much, in my opinion. And not even in the overwhelming kind of way. It was too much in that I literally would forget that vampires were even a thing in this book until one showed up again, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's vampires going on too. We need to remember that there are vampires afoot out here. And I just didn't really feel like they added enough to this story in themselves, and that it really just felt like setting up for the next book in the series, which I don't even know if that's true or not. I haven't Googled to see if there's a third book coming out or when it's going to be released or what a synopsis is of it. But just from reading the second book, I feel like there's going to be a third book and it's going to be focused on vampires. That's the vibe I got from this one. So I just didn't really feel like it was that satisfying because it just didn't hit the same, you know? I definitely liked Ninth House more, and I guess if there's a third one, we'll see how I feel about that one. Then, the last book in the 4-star category is One Perfect Couple by Ruth Ware. And this one is a really fun book, plot-wise as well. This is centered around a dating reality show, kind of like Love Island. They literally referenced Love Island in the book. But it is a couples dating show where I don't even remember how many couples, but several couples go on this show and they basically test their love. They do like the newlywed game where they ask questions about their partners and see who gets the most right. And then they are slowly eliminated. And our main character goes on this show with her boyfriend, who is an aspiring actor. And she's an academic. She has no interest in being on this show, really. But she goes just to support her boyfriend. And they have a whole plan of how she's going to get eliminated early on so that he can stay and get his 15 minutes worth of fame and all of these bookings and blah, blah, blah. You know, all of the things that people that go on Love Island go on there for. You know, they're not actually there looking for love. They're there looking for their followers. They're there looking for their own 15 minutes worth of fame so that they can get a deal with Pretty Little Thing and sell some clothes that are mass produced in China. You know, that's what it's about. That makes it sound like I hate reality dating shows. I still watch them periodically and I still enjoy Love Island, but like, we all know you're not there to find love, okay? Okay, some of them are. Some of them actually are, because there are couples that I really like from Love Island that have actually gone on to have like happy marriages and children and all of that stuff, and I love them. You know, we love the Olivia and Alexes of the Love Island pool, but you know, they're not that common. Most of them are just there to get followers and get famous, you know? However, this reality dating show takes a turn pretty early on when a big storm hits the tropical island that they are staying on, and they completely lose contact with the crew, and the couples are basically stranded on this tropical island all by themselves in the aftermath of a devastating tropical storm. And I rated this 4 stars because it's more of a survival thriller than a psychological thriller, and it wasn't bad. It just wasn't really what I was expecting, honestly. I was expecting a lot more, like, creepy, you know, someone's on this island with us and, you know, we're dying one by one. I was expecting, like, a murderer to be on this island, because it does mention them dying one by one in the synopsis, and I imagined them, you know, trying to figure out who is murdering them on this island, but it just really wasn't as exciting as I wanted it to be. It was still really good. I just felt like it had potential to be more exciting than it was. So I ended up giving it a 4 star for those reasons, and the fact that I have also read better Ruth Ware books. All right, next up we have 4.25 stars, and I have 2 books in this category. The first one is They Never Learn by Lane Fargo, and this book focuses on a university professor who is doing her own brand of vigilante justice, where she kills horrible men on campus. And I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was so fun. I thought it was really intriguing, and I did enjoy it a lot. The only thing that I didn't enjoy was the ending. I didn't really care for how it ended once again. I thought the premise of the story was so good. I enjoyed a lot of it, but I just felt like it could have been a little bit better. You know, it definitely wasn't perfect. Alrighty, the bag is done. I don't have scissors with me right now, so I can't cut off the final piece, but nonetheless, it's done. For those curious, this is how much yarn I have left. Alright, now I'm going to switch to finishing up this one while we finish up this list, because we're getting close to being done, which, God, we should be. We're at 2 hours of recording. I'm really yapping up a storm for what I thought was going to be a pretty quick video. I should know myself better than that. I'm a yapper. And the next book on the list is Murder Your Employer by Rupert Holmes, which, if you were around when I was reading this book, I do believe that I talked about it a little bit on my channel, because I remember doing a Pina Colada song edit for it. Because yes, this is the same Rupert Holmes of Pina Colada song fame.
If you like pina coladas, get caught in the rain.
He apparently writes books now. I didn't know that either, and that is, if I'm being honest, the sole reason why I picked up this book. Well, maybe not the sole reason, because the cover is also pretty. So it was the author's name that I recognized, and the fact that the cover is very pretty on this book as to why I read it. And it was so fun. I thought that it was a really good time. It is a very unique concept because it has to do with this very secretive murder school that our main character is recruited into when he is trying to murder his employer, as the title would suggest. And he doesn't do a very good job. It's like a botched attempt. And he basically gets recruited to go to McMaster's, where they teach you all about poisons and ways to get away with murder and all that fun stuff, so that he can commit his murder and get away with it. And this was just such a fun concept for a book. I thoroughly enjoyed the entire ride. I do think that there are parts where it could have been improved, so it's definitely not a perfect book, but it was such a fun read. And I did the audiobook, so listening to Neil Patrick Harris narrate this book was just chef's kiss. It was so good. And I feel like that just made it even a little bit more fun than it already was. Next up is the 4.5 star category, and we have 4 books in this category. First up, we have Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, which I really enjoyed this book. I think that Abby Jimenez is fastly becoming one of my favorite romance authors. She's one of the only, like, rom-com authors whose books are actually funny. Like, this book actually made me laugh out loud, which I feel like never happens with books that are supposed to be rom-coms. They're all rom, no com, okay? This book is actually a rom-com, truly. And it was another book club pick for my work book club, and everyone felt the same way. We were all talking about the parts that made us laugh. It was a cute story. It is a classic, you know, city meets country kind of love story, and, you know, they're part of two totally different worlds, and they have to figure out if they want to make this relationship work and how to do that. With the added plot point that our main female character is, I believe, 10 years older than her love interest. So that's another hang up that she has about it. But it was such a good book. It was so cute, and I really, really enjoyed it a lot. Obviously, I rated it 4.5 stars. The next book on my list of 4.5 star books is The House in the Cerulean Sea. Yet another workbook club pick. This was such a cute story. I have heard nothing but good things about this book, and now I see why. I also really loved this book quite a bit. This book has me saying some pretty out there statements because I really liked the Antichrist in this book. Little Lucy. He's so cute. I loved him. He was great. Chauncey, a little octopus looking kid, just wants to be a bellhop, and he like practices taking people's coats and taking their luggage and stuff when they come to visit. It's so cute. He begs to do people's laundry. Like, give me some little monster children that just have such simple desires in their lives, like being a bellhop, and my heart just melts. I love it so much. It's so fun. But yeah, I rated this book 4.5 stars. I do think that, like, there were some parts that I think could have been better. I definitely don't think it was perfect, but I did really enjoy it overall. Next up, we have Ninth House. So I did do a reread of Ninth House again this year, ahead of reading Hellbent, just because it's been so long since I read Ninth House that I needed the refresher before jumping into Hellbent. So I did read this one, and I rated it the same as I did the first time. I rated it 4.5 stars. I did like this book still more than Hellbent, and I think that just comes down to the storytelling was just a little cleaner in Ninth House than it was in Hellbent. And I, once again, blame that on the vampires. I think if the vampires weren't in Hellbent, I would have liked that book quite a bit more. Though I do understand needing to set up for the next book in the series, it was a lot, okay? And lastly, in the 4.5 star category, it's another reread. I reread Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I did audio for this one. I initially read it physically the first time that I read it, and it was still really good. This is a prime example of when a thriller reread is really fun, because some of the plot twists in Lock Every Door really caught me off guard the first time that I read them, and it was really fun going back through the book, knowing how it ended, and being able to kind of suss out more of the stuff that is just a little bit off earlier in the book, that once you know what's actually happening, makes a lot more sense than it did the first time that I read it. So yeah, I gave that one 4.5 stars yet again, because it's a solid thriller in my opinion. A very solid thriller. Then we had two books that I rated 4.75 stars. The first one was Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This is the second book in the Part of Your World trilogy. It's not focused on the same couple, but it is focused on the best friend of our main female love interest in Part of Your World. And now we're getting her love story in Yours Truly. And this one I rated 4.75 stars. I just think it's so cute. I loved it so much. There is a really cute kind of pen pal style relationship when they're first getting to know each other. The main male love interest is a little bit awkward, and he's able to communicate more effectively through written words than he is through speaking directly to the main character. So they end up exchanging notes and letters and things like that. And that's just so cute to me. I love a good letter. I love the idea of exchanging love notes and love letters and things like that. And I was also very into the love interest and the main character. I loved all the characters in this book. I was just like, kicking my feet, giggling while I was reading this book, and I really enjoyed it. My only qualm was that this did have a pregnancy trope, which, if you have watched my romance trope tier list video, I'm not a big fan of. I really don't like the pregnancy trope. It just rubs me the wrong way, especially when you have a main character that is such a strong and powerful, like, career woman. I just think that the pregnancy trope is just, it's not it. I don't like it. It just feels like it kind of reduces the main character down to just having kids, being able to reproduce. And there's just so much more to the characters than that, and it's just not something that I'm into. So it probably would have been a 5-star book, honestly, if it didn't have that. And then the miscommunication trope, it just made me mad in this book, if I'm honest. But everything besides those two things, I really, really loved. So I couldn't knock it too much. But if it didn't have those two tropes that I really don't like, it probably would have been 5 stars. But alas, we sit at 4.75 now. Then the other book in that 4.75 star category is The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year. So this is a murder mystery / holiday romance. And though it was a little confusing at times, I will say, because they are like investigating a murder, it was still really cute, and I did really enjoy it quite a bit. There was a miscommunication trope in this one, but it was more palatable, I would say, than the one in Yours Truly. The one in Yours Truly is really like a non-issue. This one is like a miscommunication in that, he thought he was flirting and she thought he was being rude to her, and it just like kicked off from there. So I do like the miscommunication trope in this one a little bit more. Overall, I thought it was a really fun book, and I did really enjoy it. The plot is basically that these two authors are invited to spend Christmas at a renowned mystery author's house. She's basically like Agatha Christie. It's even set in the UK, so I'm pretty sure she's supposed to be Agatha Christie. And the female lead is a super fan of this author, and I really enjoyed that. The way that she feels about this author is reminiscent to me about how I feel about Agatha Christie books, so I could resonate with her on that level. And the mystery part was fun. The romance part was cute, if not a little weird at times, because they would be like about to kiss, and then one of them would like think of something that had to do with the mystery at hand, and then they would just be like, to the library, and it would just completely fizzle out any kind of romance that was happening. So that was a little odd, but other than that, I really enjoyed it, and it was a really fun read. I thought it was great for me at Christmas time, and I'll have to look into this author and see if they have any other books that are similar. But yeah, this one I ended up rating 4.75 stars. And now for the final category, the 5-star tier. I had one book that I rated 5 stars in the entirety of 2024, and I am sorry to report that it is not even a new book. It was a reread, and it was because I reread Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. It is still, to this day, even after I have read 20 plus Agatha Christie books, my favorite one. I just think that the mystery is so well done. It is so intriguing. It's fast paced. It's fun. And I just, no matter how many times I listen to it, never see the ending coming. This is always the Agatha Christie book that I recommend to anyone that asks me, what Agatha Christie book should I read? This is always the one I recommend because it is a standalone book and it is arguably her best work. I rated it 5 stars. I don't even know how many times I've read this book, but every time I thoroughly enjoy it. Every time it is such a joy to read, so I had to give it 5 stars because I never get tired of this story. I have watched adaptations. As a kid, I played computer games based on this book, and it's just always been such a good story. And that has not changed in the 80 years since it was first published. I believe that it is her best-selling book of all time, and that is for good reason. It is so good, and I will never stop singing praises of the book, And Then There Were None. So yeah, that is the end of my 2024 reading wrap-up. I didn't make much progress on this. I maybe added like one more row, so I need to add 4 more at some point. I did finish this one. I just need to cut off this end and sew in these loose ends, but this one is now done. So we did get some productive things done as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this cozy little crochet with me while I recap the books that I read in 2024. Hopefully this video isn't too terribly long. I have a lot of editing to do based on the current runtime of me recording this. Tell me down in the comments what your favorite book that you read in 2024 was, and I may add it to my TBR and read it in 2025. We'll see. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like down below. Let me know. You should also subscribe while you're down there because I put out new videos every single week. And yeah, I hope you guys are having a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Stay safe, stay warm if you are also experiencing some winter weather currently, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!